To the urgent question, Adrian Ramsay.
Mr. Speaker, to ask the Secretary of State for FCDO if he will make a statement on the UK's assessment of the likelihood of genocide in Gaza.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday, alongside partners, the UK convened a meeting of the UN Security Council in response to the intolerable civilian suffering and humanitarian need in Gaza. As I told this House yesterday, Israel's denial of aid is appalling. Tons of food are currently sitting, rotting, at the Gaza-Israel border, blocked from reaching people who are starving. Israeli ministers have said Israel's decision to block this aid is a pressure lever. This is cruel and it is indefensible. Overnight, yet more Palestinians have been killed in Israeli strikes. This must end. The message yesterday was clear. The world demands Israel stop and change course immediately. With our allies, we are telling the government of Israel, lift the block on aid entering Gaza now. Enable the UN and all humanitarians to save lives now. We need an immediate ceasefire now. Humanitarian aid must never be used as a political tool or military tactic, and the UK will not support any aid mechanism that seeks to deliver political or military objectives or puts vulnerable civilians at risk. The International Court of Justice case on genocide is ongoing, Mr. Speaker. We support the ICJ. We support its independence. The ICJ issued a set of provisional measures in this case, and we support those measures. Israel has an obligation to implement them. It is the UK government's long-standing position that any formal determination as to whether genocide has occurred is a matter for a competent court and not for governments or non-judicial bodies. The UK is fully committed to upholding our responsibilities under domestic and international law, and we have at all times acted in a manner consistent with our legal obligations, including under the Genocide Convention. The devastation from this conflict must end, Mr. Speaker. Our complete focus is on lifting Israeli restrictions on aid, on freeing the hostages, on protecting civilians, and on restoring the ceasefire. We will work urgently with our allies and partners on further pressure to make Israel change course.
Adrian Ramsay.
Mr. Speaker, overnight, the UN's Emergency Relief Coordinator, Tom Fletcher, warned that a genocide was possible in Gaza. 1 in 5 people faces starvation. The entire population is facing high levels of acute food insecurity. In Gaza, Gaza North, Deir al-Balah, Khan Yunis and Rafah, there is a risk of famine. And there's one primary cause: Israel's aid blockade since the 2nd of March. The Security Council were told that civilians in Gaza have again been forcibly displaced and confined into ever-shrinking spaces, with 80% of the territory either within Israeli militarised zones or under displacement orders. Israeli airstrikes on the European hospital in Gaza yesterday killed 28 people, with further reports of at least 48 deaths overnight from strikes elsewhere. So can he tell us whether the FCDO has conducted any recent assessment of its own on the risk that the Israeli authorities are committing genocide? Last night, the UK's ambassador to the UN rightly called on Israel to lift the restrictions and ensure a return to delivery of aid in Gaza in line with humanitarian principles and international law. But this is not enough. Notwithstanding the government's position that it's for judicial bodies to make a determination, what is the minister's response to the latest UN assessment that genocide is possible in Gaza? Can he confirm whether the UK stands by the obligation to prevent duty in the Genocide Convention? Parliament needs to know whether the UN Emergency Relief Coordinator's assessment will lead to a shift in the UK government's position. Why is it that when the horrors increase, the UK government's position stays the same? And lastly, to echo the words in Tom Fletcher's briefing, will you act decisively to prevent genocide and ensure respect for international humanitarian law? Or will you instead repeat the empty words, "We did all we could"?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for asking these important questions. The testimony of the Emergency Relief Coordinator, the very most senior official in the entire humanitarian system in the world, last night at the UN Security Council meeting that we called with our allies, is clearly incredibly important. And I can confirm to the honourable member that we do abide by our international law obligations, including to the Genocide Convention, and we consider in all of our IHL assessments, which are ongoing, all of the relevant tests, and we will continue to do so. The honourable gentleman, Mr. Speaker, asks important questions, questions which have echoed in this chamber yesterday and throughout this long and painful conflict. This government has taken steps, whether it's restoring funding, suspending arms exports, working with our partners in the UN and elsewhere, but clearly we are in a situation today where nobody in this House would wish to be, nobody on these benches, and I'm sure nobody on the benches opposite. We will need to take more and more action until we see the change that we need, but the central question, as I've told this House repeatedly, the central question is that aid is not being allowed into Gaza. While it is not allowed into Gaza, there is nothing that can be done to get the aid at the scale and in the manner necessary to save Palestinian life. And it is on that point that we call the Security Council, and on that point we will continue to act.
Can I just remind people not to use you, because I'm not responsible for some of those statements. Right. Andy McDonald, you put also a UKIP.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister has repeatedly said that we do everything to observe international law. Will he please accept that there is a growing body of opinion that says the UK is not doing that? They're not complying with our obligations. And we are not doing so if we continue to supply parts to the F-35 programme. These are the weapons that are dropping on children in Gaza. We cannot say that we're observing the Genocide, Geneva Conventions and Rome Statutes if we continue to supply those goods. And he talks about doing all that we could. If that's the case, then why on earth are we not making it abundantly clear to Israel that trading with them is not an option whilst this continues? So the answer to the question, is he doing all that he could? Because there's many people in this place and beyond who think we are not.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend. I know his commitment to these issues over a long period of time. I don't accept the premise of his question. Whether or not we abide by our legal obligations is indeed a question that will be determined by the courts. It's being determined by the courts this week, and so I will leave it to the courts to make judgments on our obligations. We are taking all of the steps that we can to bring this conflict to a close. He mentions the vital questions of the F-35 programme. I know this House understands the significance of that programme, not just in Europe, but across the world. The carve-out that we have put in place, we have done so on the basis of robust legal advice which is being tested in the courts this week. We must abide by our obligations to our allies. We are not selling F-35s directly to the Israeli authorities. We continue to supply a global spares pool, which is necessary for the continued function of the F-35 programme, which has critical importance to European security. We make these judgments calmly and soberly, and we will continue to do so.
Shadow Minister Wendy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The situation in the Middle East continues to cause concern. That's why, on this side of the House, we've been clear. We need to see the return of the hostages and a lasting ceasefire. And while we welcome the release of Eden Alexander, there are still 58 hostages held in Gaza by the Iranian-backed terrorists. Those who are still alive are being held in the most dreadful and appalling conditions, without access to aid and medicines. And what they and their families have been going through for approaching 600 days is unimaginable. They must be released as a matter of urgency. So can the Minister give an update on the diplomatic steps being taken by the Government to secure the release of the remaining hostages? hostages? And what is Britain contributing to those efforts? This conflict would have been over long ago had Hamas released them, and the House should not be in any doubt that Hamas and their Iranian sponsors are committed to wiping out the State of Israel. So can the Minister tell us what steps are being taken with international partners to deal with the threat to peace, security and stability posed by Iran? We have constantly asked for a strategy to tackle Iran, so when will this come forward? The government has shared our view that Hamas can have no role in the future governance of Gaza. So can we have an update on the practical steps the government is taking to secure this outcome and end of the misery that Hamas is inflicting on Gaza and the threat they pose to Israel? Mr Speaker, we've debated aid access to Gaza on several occasions, including in recent days. So can the Minister tell us exactly how much UK-funded aid, both directly and indirectly through multilateral organisations, is waiting to enter Gaza and what a breakdown of that aid is? The government has known for a number of months about the concerns Israel has about the delivery of aid to Gaza and aid diversion. So can the Minister today explain what discussions have taken place with Israel and what practical solutions ministers have offered to support the delivery of aid that addresses their concerns? And has the Minister been directly engaged in the discussions that have taken place with Israel and the US over alternative ways to get aid into Gaza? Does he have a view on this, and will the UK be participating? We have also been clear that while we continue to press for humanitarian aid and accountability, we do not consider the actions in Gaza to constitute genocide. This case brought by South Africa to the International Court of Justice is not helping in advance.
Please. Can we please stick to the time? It was almost a minute over. We've got to work within the timescales. Please, if we can time speeches, lots of members need to get in. We've got to support each other. I think the Minister's got enough to go on.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I, of course, welcome, as the Foreign Secretary did yesterday, the release of Eden Alexander. I know this whole House thinks of those hostages who remain in Hamas captivity. I have been in direct contact with American officials involved in that release, and it is a very welcome development. We are focused on ensuring that a future for Gaza has no role for Hamas. We are working as part of the Arab Reconstruction Plan in order to try and achieve that. The Honourable Lady asks an important question about what proportion of British aid is unable to get in to Gaza at the moment. Of course, for the last almost 2 months, the horrendous answer is 100%. But even before that, there was very significant restrictions on the aid that we wish to get into Gaza. I saw for myself the items that were unable to cross from Al-Arish into Rafah, so the proportions will be very high, but I will see with my officials whether or not I can break it down in greater detail for her.
Rosena Allin-Khan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Slow and agonising breaths, scared, crying, emaciated bodies fighting for every heartbeat. Death by 1,000 cuts for the children and for the parents who were watching their babies deliberately being starved to death. Almost 1 million children at risk of famine and death in Gaza. Those who have stood by and allowed this to happen should hold their heads in shame. I call on this government to sanction Israeli officials until the blockade is lifted, because if we do not act now, this will be on us.
I know the strength of feeling behind my honourable friend's words. I'm sure she is aware of the findings of the IPC report on Monday, which delineates in great detail the precise suffering that is being felt because of a lack of food and nutrition. We are horrified by those findings. The need for action could not be more urgent.
Monica Harding, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Israel's continuing blockade of Gaza, now exceeding 70 days, is utterly unacceptable. Will the government now recognise that the blockade constitutes a clear violation of international law? The government must respect whatever determination the ICJ reaches regarding genocide. There are already clear obligations on the government to prevent genocide in Gaza, arising from the ICJ's January 2024 order. Has the government taken any steps to meet these obligations? Will the government commit today to banning the export of all UK arms to Israel? Will the government reconsider sanctions on extremist Israeli ministers like Bezalel Smotrich, who called for Gaza to be destroyed? Will the government commit to an immediate recognition of a Palestinian state? And as the UN's British relief chief told the Security Council yesterday, if we have not done all we could to end the violence in Gaza, we should fear the judgment of future generations. Does the Minister agree?
Mr. Speaker, these responsibilities weigh heavily on me and every member of the government and the Foreign Office team. But let us not forget what this government has done, whether it is restoring funding to UNRWA, suspending arms exports in the way that we described, whether it's providing 129 million in humanitarian aid and then being one of the loudest voices in trying to ensure that it enters, whether it's working with Jordan to fly medicines into Gaza, Egypt to treat medically evacuated civilians, Project Pure Hope to help Gazan children in the UK, Kuwait to support vulnerable children through UNICEF. We are taking steps. We take the judgments of the ICJ incredibly seriously. But I cannot pretend to the House that the events in the occupied Palestinian territories of recent days are acceptable, and we will continue to take every step we can to get a change of course.
Afzal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow is the 77th anniversary of the 1948 Nakba, which saw hundreds of thousands of Palestinians displaced from their homes. This still continues today, and the UN Security Council has said action is now required to prevent genocide. A key step to a peaceful two-state solution would be recognizing Palestinian statehood, something Israel is trying to prevent. So with 147 countries recognizing Palestinian statehood, Minister, is now not the right time for the UK to do so too?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, the question of recognition of a Palestinian state is one obviously of vital importance. We want to do so as a contribution to a more stable region. We can see the serious and immediate threats to the viability of Palestinian life, and that is what we are focused on in these most urgent of days.
Far the House, Edward Leigh.
I've been a member of the Conservative Friends of Israel for over 40 years, longer than anybody here. And Hamas is a brutal terrorist organisation that hides people, their own fighters, under hospitals. But it's frankly unacceptable to recklessly bomb a hospital. It's unacceptable to starve a whole people. Is the Minister aware that many friends of Israel worldwide, notwithstanding narrow legal definitions, are asking this moral question: when is genocide not genocide?
Mr. Speaker, I have heard in recent weeks a series of very powerful interventions from the benches opposite, and I take them seriously with the weight that they hold, particularly from the Father of the House and my neighbour in Lincolnshire. We will not move towards making determinations from dispatch boxes on questions of legal determination, but that does not mean we will wait, Mr. Speaker. The preliminary judgments of the ICJ and the provisional measures that they set out are important, and we will abide by them.
Helena Dollimore.
Speaker, as the Minister has said, the situation is intolerable, with 1 in 5 Gazans facing starvation, and as he has also said, the use of aid as a weapon of war by Israel is inexcusable. The continued firing of rockets by Hamas and the continued detention of hostages is also inexcusable, and it all must end. So I welcome the UK, with our international allies, calling an urgent briefing on this situation at the UN Security Council, and there the UN humanitarian chief was clear in his warning about the dire consequences of this continuing. So can the Minister tell me what steps this Labour government is taking to get more aid in, to get the hostages out and bring about the ceasefire and two-state solution that we all in this House so desperately want to see?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend, who I know has been long committed to these issues and used to be an aid worker herself. She's a doughty advocate on these points. We remain absolutely committed to a two-state solution. We are focusing all of our diplomatic efforts on ensuring that the current approach is changed, that we return to a diplomatic solution, that we have a ceasefire, the release of hostages, and a move back to that two-state solution that, as she so rightly puts it, is vitally important.
Oliver Dowden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The situation in Gaza is clearly intolerable, and Israel does have to find a way of getting aid in safely and without diversion. But would the Minister agree with me? We need to be very careful about the use of the word genocide and that we don't devalue this word. This is used to describe the systematic and deliberate murder of 6 million Jews by Nazi Germany. We must question, and I do not believe that a war designed to release hostages and remove a terrorist threat and against a terrorist that hides amongst the civilian population crosses that threshold.
It's the long-standing position of governments of all stripes that it's for international courts to make determinations of this nature, and we will abide by our obligations under international humanitarian law.
Florence Esher.
Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, the reality is that since the 2nd of March, no food or medical aid supplies have reached over 2.3 million Palestinians. The reality is that many of us from across this House have attended many statements, Westminster Hall debates, submitted parliamentary questions, asking the government around this really critical issue. The reality is that those hostages still remain in captivity and they need to be released. But the reality is that by using aid to punish so many people is wrong. Does the Minister agree with me that under the Genocide Convention, the UK, as a state party, has an obligation not only to prevent and punish genocide, but also to avoid actions which may assist or enable genocidal acts?
My honourable friend asks important questions both about aid access and the nature of aid delivery. And I want to be very clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the UK will not support any aid mechanism that seeks to deliver political or military objectives or put vulnerable people at risk. The obligations under international humanitarian law and international law more broadly are clear, and they fall on Israel as the occupying power, and they must abide by them.
Mike Martin.
Madam Deputy Speaker, very few things in politics, particularly international politics, are black or white. However, this is one of those issues. The Israeli government is using collective punishment of the civilian Palestinian population, and this is illegal under international law. In particular, it contravenes the Geneva Conventions, which Israel is a party to. My question is, does the Minister think that the British government has lost its moral and legal compass in continuing its tacit support for Israel?
Exactly. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have set out some of what this government has done. I could continue for some time, but let me be clear, because the honourable gentleman rightly points out the absolutely appalling nature of any attempt to try and weaponise aid, to try and use incendiary language, which is clearly in breach of international legal obligations. We have condemned from this dispatch box much of that language. Some of that language was repeated by the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, and I want to take the opportunity again to say the British government absolutely condemns that inflammatory language, will continue to do so, and makes our views known in the most forceful possible way with the Israeli government.
Abdisan Mohammed.
Madam Deputy Speaker. The international community have failed to stop Israel's impunity. We have collectively failed to act on the violations as they are committed and to hold Israel to account. And in our collective failure, Palestinians in Gaza face collective punishment. Israeli ministers' statements of stopping humanitarian aid as one of their main levers of pressure is not only cruel and indefensible, they are explicit admissions of violating international law. Minister, I hear our condemnations, but I see no action. Why are we still sending arms? Why are we not sanctioning ministers? The UN have said what many know to be true. We, as a signatory to the Geneva Convention, have a legal obligation to prevent a genocide from taking place. Minister, when will we act?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the member for Sheffield Central, my friend, is a very forceful advocate on these questions, and she points to failure, and I recognise that failure, that we are still so many months on, so many days on with the people of Gaza, the people of West Bank, and of course the hostages in the most distressing possible circumstances. I won't comment from this dispatch box on sanctions as she would expect, but I can assure her that we will be working urgently with our allies and partners on further pressure to make Israel change course.
Kit Malthouse.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's becoming increasingly difficult to keep up with the slaughter in Gaza, the brutality and cruelty in the West Bank, and starvation as a policy. And the crimes come daily. Crimes such as the recent killing of Mohammed Bardawal, one of only 3 key eyewitnesses to the slaughter of rescue workers just a few weeks ago, their bodies being buried in shallow graves. It's clear to everybody that crimes are being committed daily. Now, as a number of members have pointed out, the UK is a party to international agreements which provide for a positive obligation to act to prevent genocide, torture, to protect the rights of other people. And we have an obligation as a member of the Security Council of the United Nations and as a state party to the Geneva Conventions to promote peace and security. So what advice has the Minister taken as to his own liability in this regard, which will attach to him as a decision maker? And has the government received advice as to whether the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, or indeed any senior officials or previous ministers may be exposed when the reckoning comes?
Madam Deputy Speaker, as you would expect, I wouldn't discuss internal legal advice in this chamber, whether that applies to me or other ministers of the government. I'd reassure the honourable gentleman that right across the government we understand the gravity of the situation. We understand the weight that now falls to us to try and ensure changes from a trajectory which is diabolical. We will continue to use our role in the Security Council at the G7 and as part of the E3, as we did yesterday, and that action will not stop.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the Minister still refuses to address the central issue. Our obligation to prevent genocide under the Rome Statute has already been triggered by the ample evidence in front of us of Israeli war crimes in Gaza. So I ask the Minister, in the week marking 77 years since the Nakba, how many more times will he come to this chamber with just words? Words that do nothing. We need action. And let us be clear, it's not a case of if, but when he will end the UK's complicity in arming a state accused of genocide against the Palestinians, and when he will finally impose widespread sanctions on Israel. And I say this to the Minister, history will judge his delay.
Well said. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would just like to remind the House of the decisions that we took last year. And we have discussed the question of the F-35 global spares pool, where the basis of which we've made a carve-out is clear and been debated many times. But let me be clear, aside from that carve-out, we took an assessment, we took a solemn duty on becoming the government to make an assessment which did not appear to have been made about a serious risk of potential breaches of international humanitarian law. We then suspended arms export licences where those weapons could be used in such conduct. That means in Gaza, that means in West Bank, that means in relation to all of the areas where those risks accrued. We took far-reaching action That action is still in place. We continue to conduct those assessments. I can understand why many members may feel frustrated about the F-35 carve-out. Perhaps they feel frustrated too that we will continue to sell arms which cannot be used, in our view, which could not risk a violation, as, according to the assessment much discussed here. But we think it is right that we do continue to, for example, provide body armour that might be used by NGOs in Gaza, that we do provide part of the supply chain that could end up in the hands of NATO allies. We have taken far-reaching action on arms. That is important work which we are proud of.
Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have just returned from the High Court this morning, where his government's lawyers will argue, when defending the continued supply of F-35 components, that, and I quote, "The evidence available does not support a finding of genocide, and certainly there is a tenable view that no genocide has occurred or is occurring." So, Minister, it appears your government, whether it's told you or not, has already made a determination. And that would explain, I believe, why there is no intention to have an independent assessment of whether a genocide is likely, because the government knows that were they so to do, they would be revealing an unpalatable truth, a truth which would then prevent them from supplying Israel with the weapons that it needs to continue its merciless onslaught. It really is as grubby as that, Minister, isn't it?
Good question.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it is not as grubby as that. Almost every word of that. Well, firstly, clearly there is an ongoing legal case where we are not going to litigate that case in this chamber, as you would expect. A judicial review on the F-35 element is happening over these days. The judge will find on it, and we will respect that judgment. On the question, let me be absolutely clear to the honourable gentleman. We continue to conduct assessments across our full range of responsibilities under international law. It is simply not true to suggest we are avoiding making any internal assessment in order to justify policy. We continue to assess these things carefully. We do it on a rolling basis. We do it regularly. What he has said is simply not true.
Paul Wall.
Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for his personal commitment to this cause, and can I thank the UK Government for putting this on the record at the UN yesterday as a matter of extreme urgency. But can I also put to him directly the challenge from Tom Fletcher yesterday, the UN's aid chief. He said, for those killed and whose voices are silenced, what more evidence do you need now? Will you act decisively to prevent genocide? What's his answer to that question?
I thank my honourable friend, who has been committed to these issues ever since he came to this place, and I know before as well. Tom Fletcher's words are important. As I said earlier, he is the most senior member of the humanitarian community in the world. What he said at the meeting that we called yesterday is very, very important. We have not waited for the meeting yesterday. We have not waited for determinations of international courts to take action. Let us not forget what we have done, whether it is in relation to UNRWA, whether it is in relation to the arms suspension, whether it's the sanctions on Israeli settlers, whether it is our convening role in the United Nations Security Council. We will continue to take action. Mr. Fletcher rightly asks for decisive action. Has our action yet been decisive? Clearly, Madam Deputy Speaker, it has not. Hostages remain detained. Palestinians continue to suffer. A two-state solution feels very distant indeed. We have not yet had the decisive effect that we would wish to see, and we will continue to act until we do.
Sir Julian Lewis.
As well as raping, kidnapping and killing civilians on October the 7th for its own sake, Hamas had a strategy of trying to prevent further peace deals between Israel and its Arab neighbours by provoking a massive, frenzied reaction to the atrocities. Does the Minister share my dismay that that brutal strategy seems to be succeeding?
I do share his dismay that events in the region since October the 7th, since the horrific actions of October the 7th, have involved an enormous amount of bloodshed, an enormous amount of civilian suffering. This government hopes that we will yet see a day where there is a stable region with normal diplomatic relations amongst all of its members, with a two-state solution, with two states living securely and safely side by side, and I regret that that feels such a distant prospect.
Nasha. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 77 years on since the Nakba, Israel's illegal occupation eats away at the land, and now we have, and let me just repeat the word loud and clear, genocide, plausible genocide, ICJ, plausible genocide, ICC, plausible genocide, Amnesty International, plausible genocide, United Nations. What I want to know is, since this week's news, what I'm asking the Minister is what new assessments have been done and how often are they done to determine what else and what other actions we can do to stop what is happening to the Gazans, to the children, to the civilians, to the aid workers, to make sure that we can get aid in. What other pressures and levers can this government use, not just from our country, but as a bloc with international partners and others, in addition to recognising Palestine? Surely that's long overdue.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend asks important questions about assessments. They are made regularly, they're made on a rolling basis, they're made in light of new events. But I want to reassure her that we do not wait for assessments, nor do we wait for final legal determinations before taking action. I've listed some of that action already, and I can reassure her that we will work urgently with our allies and partners on further pressure to make Israel change course.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Even if the Minister can't condemn what is obviously an act of genocide, could he tell us in clear terms, are we still supplying parts to F-35 jets that do find their way to Israel, that do take part in the bombardment of Gaza? And are there still flights going from RAF Akrotiri over to Israel that are carrying military equipment that can be used either to bomb Gaza or to undertake military action against the people of the West Bank?
To be clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, the decisions that we take on arms bind every part of the UK government. We are a government committed to abide by our international legal obligations, and we will continue to do so. Let me be clear again on the position on F-35s. Where F-35 sales work directly to Israel, and whether that is in relation to any particular component, those sales have been suspended. Where the sales are to a global pool, which is necessary for the continued function for the global F-35 programme, that has not been suspended. Where sales go to a global pool, it is clearly possible that they could find final destination in Israel. But to suspend our provision of components to the F-35 global pool would, in effect, be to render the F-35 programme inoperable. And it is on that basis that we set out the decisions that we took in September.
Andrew Pakes.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I first put on record the relief I feel and many others about the release of Eden Alexander, and that I am saying a prayer for the other hostages. Every week, though, we come back to this house, the horror is greater. And for many of us this morning, woke up to a spokesperson for the Israeli government on the Today programme denying there is hunger happening in Gaza at all. But this house knows the reality. 10 weeks into a blockade of aid by the Israeli government, with 1 in 5 starving. He will know, Madam Deputy Speaker, you will know and be aware that Tom Fletcher spoke passionately and with purpose yesterday at the UN about the collective failure of the UN to speak out previously. So can I ask the Minister, how do we avoid that this time? What more evidence do we need before we take action? What more action can be done?
Madam Deputy Speaker, as I said earlier, the words of Tom Fletcher in the United Nations Security Council are important, and the IPC assessment that was produced on Monday, this is an assessment which is authoritative and thorough in its production, is the most important indication of needs in Gaza, and it should be taken seriously by everyone in this chamber and indeed by the Israeli government as well. We will we have, as my honourable friend who has been long committed to these issues, he knows the actions that we have taken so far. I will not speculate from this dispatch box other than to reassure the House that we will be working urgently with our allies and partners in order to ensure that Israel changes course.
Dr. Andrew Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There can be few now who would believe that the conduct of the Netanyahu government is anything other than gross and disproportionate. But does the Minister agree with me that the actor in the region that is unequivocally embarked on genocide is Hamas, with its self-avowed policy of killing Jews and eradicating the State of Israel?
Hear, hear. Well said, Dr. Andrew.
I have condemned Hamas, their despicable actions, their ugly and unacceptable rhetoric many times within this dispatch box, and I'm happy to do so again. It is the events of October the 7th, in all of their full horror, that triggered this most recent, most horrific round of violence.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So in addition to calling for the release of all hostages, Tom Fletcher, the UN Emergency Release Chief, also asked last night, what action will we tell future generations we each took to stop the 21st century atrocity to which we bear daily witness in Gaza? So what action will the government take if in the next 24 hours Israel doesn't allow aid into Gaza?
Madam Deputy Speaker, as I've said throughout the course of the afternoon, the responsibilities weigh heavily on all of us. We do not view the situation as acceptable, and we will continue to take steps with our allies and partners to urge Israel to change course.
Mark Pritchard.
Madam Deputy Speaker, but as we all meet here in this rather grand palace of Westminster, the reality is on the ground that Palestinian children continue to die in the rubble. And is it not becoming clear that the central policy of the Israeli government seems more about protecting the political skin and life of the current Israeli Prime Minister rather than even saving the lives of the remaining Israeli hostages and the lives of Palestinians? I appeal to the British government to be again on the right side of history, the right side of the law, and the right side of moral judgment, and not to back one particular individual fighting for his political life back in Tel Aviv.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman speaks powerfully about the various views in Israel, and I won't speculate on the decision-making of others, but I listen very carefully to the words of Israeli hostages themselves when they have been released, what they make of the circumstances in Israel and what policy they think should be adopted. These are important voices and they echo loudly, I know, both in this chamber and across the world. We are clear, whatever the intentions, the international obligations under law on the Israeli government in relation to Gaza are indisputable, and we call today, as we have called every day, for them to abide by them.
John McDonald.
Can I refer to my register of interest? I'm the Secretary of the National Union of Journalists Parliamentary Group. It's the anniversary of the murder by Israeli forces of Shireen Abu Akleh, the renowned journalist. Alongside her on that day was another journalist, Ali Samoudi. He was shot in the back. 2 weeks ago, the Israeli forces arrested, dragged him from his home, and Ali is now in detention somewhere, we do not know where. Under international law, journalists are afforded special protection. Can I ask the Minister now that we immediately take up with the Israeli government the question of where Ali Samoudi is and to seek everything we can do to secure his release, because all he was trying to do on behalf, and he works for CNN and Reuters and Al Jazeera, he was simply reporting on some of the war crimes that are taking place.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend raises incredibly important points about journalists, and I'm happy to take up the case in question. It is, of course, not just journalists. There are a whole set of people who are afforded special protections under international law, journalists, medical professionals, and indeed aid workers, many of whom that we have seen terrible incidents in Gaza. We have been pressing for accountability and justice on those questions, and I think in particular of the 3 British nationals killed in the World Central Kitchen incident more than a year ago, still waiting for justice.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Minister accept that where prima facie evidence of genocide exists, then awaiting the determination formally to be made by a court is not sufficient for us to meet the duty to prevent under the Genocide Convention?
In this case, the International Court of Justice is clearly the correct authority. It has issued a set of provisional measures, and we support those measures.
Cat Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. What we're seeing in Gaza is civilians starving to death. What we're seeing in Gaza is aid being held for 10 weeks, used as a weapon against innocent civilians. My constituents rightly are outraged by what they're seeing, and so am I. But whilst I welcome the Minister's words, what further actions can the government take to send a clearer message to Israel that this absolutely has to stop? Will the Minister look again at sanctions? Will he look at arms export licences? And will he recognise the state of Palestine?
I know my honourable friend's constituents will be concerned as my constituents in Lincoln are concerned, as I know constituents right across the whole of the country are concerned. I have seen for my own eyes. I went to Al-Arish to see British aid languishing while people desperately required it in Gaza. I saw the restrictions that were preventing aid getting in. I can assure her and her constituents that I have raised this personally in every way that I have thought able to try and make progress, and we will continue to do so. It is a source of continued personal frustration to me and frustration to the government that we have not been able to get aid back into Gaza in accordance with international law.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Minister have any information about how much aid is being held in Hamas-controlled warehouses in Gaza? And isn't the key to this desperate situation our links to Tehran? Because at the end of the day, it's the Iranian regime which pulls the strings of its puppet organisation Hamas, which is holding these hostages in conditions which are akin to torture.
So we take serious steps, Madam Deputy Speaker, to ensure that Hamas do not get access to aid. We supported a review into UNRWA's function. Mr Fletcher set out yesterday in his remarks his view on the robustness of the United Nations provisions in order to try and prevent Hamas from stockpiling aid. And the findings of the IPC report on Monday are sobering reading about the circumstances in which Palestinian civilians are trying to live in Gaza. But I agree with him. Iran's malign role in the region must stop. They have supported Hamas, who have brought nothing but pain and misery, not just to Israelis, but to Palestinians as well.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week, the Minister said, in response to a question I asked, that forcible movement of the Gazan population out of Gaza would be forcible displacement. Forcible displacement is a war crime, and that is what is already happening and is about to accelerate. So will he say in terms, as the head of UNRWA said this week, as the former Israeli Defence Minister Moshe Yaalon said last week, that Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza?
I will resist. My honourable friend is not just a doughty advocate for the Palestinian people, he's also a very much respected lawyer, so as he would expect, I'm not going to take the opportunity to make a determination at the dispatch box, but I will be clear again that forced displacement is clearly prohibited by international law, and we're clear on that at all times.
Adnan Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Amnesty International has described the 2-month siege in Gaza as genocide in action. Israel is, according to experts, deliberately creating conditions that could lead to the physical destruction of the Palestinian people, a pattern many may argue amounts to genocide. As a signatory to the Genocide Convention, does the Minister agree that the UK has a legal duty to act when there is a risk of genocide. And that duty to prevent begins not when genocide is confirmed, not when genocide is proven, not when genocide is established, but when there is a reasonable suspicion that it is occurring. The alarm bells are flashing red. The warning signs are there for the government to act. Will the government act?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've set out both the process of determination, the provisional measures that have been issued by the ICJ, and the government's determination not to wait until cases are concluded, but to take action now to try and preserve life.
Tahir Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Israel is intentionally starving Palestinians, and action should be taken to stop the war crimes and genocide. These are the words of a leading United Nations expert on right to food. Will the Minister tell us what is preventing, or what are they scared of, in terms of imposing sanctions on Israel? Because if this dispatch box is not where we can discuss this, certainly we can't discuss this behind closed doors.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think the House has heard me talk about sanctions in the same terms over a long period of time, and I understand the frustration about not being able to speculate from this dispatch box about sanctions we might take. To do so would reduce their effectiveness and would frustrate the will of the House. We do keep all of these matters under close review. We are not scared in the performance of our duties. We are working all of the time, Madam Deputy Speaker, to try and practically change the situation on the ground, and that is to what all our efforts are directed.
Vicky Slade.
Deputy Speaker, barely a day goes by that I don't receive impassioned pleas from my constituents in Mid Dorset Northpool begging for actions, not words, from this government. And many have shared their distress that we celebrated the defeat of tyranny on VE Day at the same time as the people of Gaza starve and are bombed to oblivion. They say that we are complicit in genocide. What does he say to my constituents? Because I agree with them, but I feel powerless to do any more than come here every time and say the same thing.
Madam Deputy Speaker, deeds, not words. Restoring funding to UNRWA, suspending arms licences, £129 million in humanitarian assistance to the occupied Palestinian territories, continued work at the UN Security Council, continued work in relation to international courts. And I recognise the frustration of the House, and I do not in any way wish to weigh misery between the many, many, many people still in Gaza or the West Bank facing real hardship at this moment. But the action of this government has made a real difference to Palestinian lives. I have seen it with my own eyes, and there are people who are in safety now because of the UK government. We will continue to do what we can. I accept there is more to do, but our actions do have impact.
Ruth Jones.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for outlining the horrors being inflicted on the people of Gaza so clearly yet again today. But we have heard from the dispatch box the many times in support of the Palestinians before. He talks about court proceedings, but court proceedings take months, if not years, to complete. And men, women and children are dying every hour from hunger, disease and bombs in Gaza at the moment. They cannot wait. What is he doing? We need action, not words.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've outlined some of the action, but I would also like to reassure my honourable friend that we are not waiting for legal determinations, not least because the ICJ has issued provisional measures, but also because it is the policy of this government that we are acting now to try and improve the lot of Palestinians.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One thing we can all agree on is that we want to see the safe release of the hostages. But with that in mind, it's evident that military action of itself is and was never going to achieve that. And with that in mind, does the government support or condemn Israel for the most recent escalation of military action? And if they're not prepared to condemn them at this stage, how many more innocent deaths must there be before they do?
My honourable friend refers to the hostages. It is some of the released hostages who have made this argument with the greatest force, and they are important words. But let me say concretely, and clearly the British government opposes the return to war in Gaza by the Israeli government. We oppose the most recent escalation.
Maureen de Just.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm sure I'm not the only member in this House who is getting increasingly frustrated by the number of discussions we are having, saying the same things over and over again, whilst the horrific situation for the Palestinian people in Gaza worsens day by day. Does the Minister agree that for us to send a clear message to Israel, we need to do three things? Number one, suspend all arms licences to Israel, including the F-35 licences. Number two, impose sanctions against Israel. And number three, recognise the State of Palestine.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the House has heard me speak of my frustration on a number of occasions, and I share it with the honourable member. I think I've addressed the three substantive points he raises already in this session, and I am the Minister. I am the Minister. These responsibilities weigh particularly heavily on me. I am not blind to the IPC. I'm not blind to Tom Fletcher's testimony. At a session we called, do the honourable members think I am unaware of the horrors that are being meted out on people in Gaza? I am not unaware. I am taking every action I can, as are other ministers. It is an intolerable situation, as you heard from the Prime Minister earlier, and we are lifting every effort to trying to change it.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Nobody wants war, but we must reflect that this is a war. It's a war between our ally, Israel, and the aggressor, Hamas. It was Hamas that brutally murdered, mutilated, and raped innocent Israeli citizens. It is Hamas that still keeps 58 hostages under lock and key. And it is Hamas who, in their own charter, have genocidal intent, calling for the wiping out of Israel and the killing of Jews. So will the Minister at least accept that for those that wish to call those trying to defend their own citizens genocidal, that plays into the hands of the terrorists themselves, who will continue to use their own citizens as human shields and give no pathway to peace?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I condemn Hamas and its actions entirely. Israel is an ally, but we say to all of our allies that international humanitarian law is a binding framework for us all. When it is breached in one place, it is a breach that echoes around the world. That is why we have been so clear on these questions throughout.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm sick and tired of coming back to this chamber, asking the same questions and getting the same answers when war crime after war crime is being committed and when a genocide is taking place. And it's a sick joke to believe that it's right, which it is, to impose sanctions on Russia for its unlawful invasion of Ukraine, yet we're meant to believe that tutting Benjamin Netanyahu and telling everyone that we think this is really bad somehow cuts the mustard. It doesn't. Words aren't enough to stop war crimes. We need more than words. We need more than actions. So can the Minister advise this House how many more Gazans need to be killed by Israel, injured by Israel, starved by Israel, until the government does the right thing and brings widespread sanctions in, like it's done on Russia, because people think we're scared and people think it's double standards?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we have taken action. I've described that action this afternoon. I have already assured the House that it is certainly not fear that shapes our actions. And I am, of course, always happy to return to this dispatch box to answer questions from parliamentarians about this question. But I would not want to give the House the impression that that is all I do. When I am not in this House, I am working on these tasks with urgency. I have listed some of the actions that we have taken since I have been the Minister. I will continue to work on these questions, and I will continue to return to the House to answer your questions when you have them.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Over the last 18 months, Israel has facilitated 1.7 million tonnes of aid going into Gaza. Very sadly, much of that aid has ended up in warehouses, trucks have been raided by Hamas operatives, and the aid has failed to get into the hands of the people that desperately need it. So now we've got a position whereby the blockade has continued. Will the Minister come up with a credible plan to actually get the aid in, require the IDF to facilitate the aid going to the people that desperately need it, and prevent Hamas and its other terrorists from capturing the aid and preventing the people of Gaza gaining the aid they desperately need?
I do condemn where Hamas has interfered with aid deliveries. I condemn it utterly. We have to be clear that considerable amounts of aid were not allowed into Gaza, even before this most recent blockade. And this blockade is now ensuring that nowhere near the scale of aid required is getting in. There are proposals, as I think the honourable member is alluding to, for other methods of getting in. We would support proposals to get aid into Gaza, provided that they are in accordance with humanitarian principles, which are vital in every conflict zone around the world, and the Emergency Relief Coordinator yesterday set out his views about how those principles need to be adhered to.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. UK manufacturers of F-35 components can place GPS markers on every single component. The UK government can ensure that every component that is exported can have a GPS marker on it. So what is the government's excuse for continuing with its programme on F-35s when it can distinguish the destination of every single component?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've set out the position on F-35s. I've set out the manner in which the global spares pool works. That is information provided by the experts who are responsible. I understand that some honourable members may disagree with those facts. The discussion is happening in a judicial review this week, and I'll not get ahead of that process.
John Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 1 in 5 are facing starvation. 90% of people are now displaced. Over 50,000 people are dead, and Gaza is the most dangerous place on earth for humanitarian workers. This has to end. But still, the government keep on condemning Netanyahu, but he doesn't listen. The time for words has to stop. We need action. So will the Minister take this time to commit to sanctioning those extremist members of the Israeli cabinet, suspending all arms trades with the Israeli government, and recognising a Palestinian state?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think those 3 points have been put to me already on the over the course of the afternoon, so I won't repeat my answers. I won't speculate on further sanctions, but I would point out he references sanctions on settlers. We have taken far-reaching sanctions on settlers. We continue to impose the violent expansion of settlements in the occupied territories, which are illegal under international law, and we will continue to do so.
Rachel Hopkins.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the Minister for his often candid comments here, but we will continue to come to this chamber and ask those questions when our constituents continue to be horrified, like we are, at the devastation that is playing out in Gaza. The UN has stated that action must be taken now to prevent genocide. So does the Minister understand that our constituents, when they see a legal response, just remain so frustrated they want to see tangible action? Does the Minister understand that?
I do understand the frustration of constituents, as I said earlier, Madam Deputy Speaker. That is a frustration that is very much shared in Lincoln, and I know across the country. Everybody in this House, everybody across the country wants to see an end to the awful scenes on our television screens.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister has stated that the legality of UK's F-35 exports is currently being tested in the courts. In the High Court, the government has made submissions that no evidence has been seen that Israel is deliberately targeting civilian women and children. There is also evidence of Israel making efforts to limit incidental harm to civilians. If the government needs to be shown evidence that Israel is deliberately targeting civilians, I suggest the Minister and his colleagues review the footage captured by the BBC of yesterday's bombing of the European Gaza hospital, or the footage emerging from the Nasser hospital, or the millions of hours of live stream footage available since October the 7th, or the thousands of reports and articles published since. The past 18 months has seen a total war of all of Gaza, with acts of ethnic cleansing and extermination according to the UN. Does the UK deny the existence of this evidence? And if so, does the government, has the government committed perjury in court?
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's obviously inappropriate to try and rehearse submissions which are currently being heard by the court.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I know that the Minister will know this, so we should put this on the record, that when President Netanyahu says that there is no way he will stop his onslaught in Gaza, he does not do so with the consent of the hostage families or indeed the majority of people in Israel. Even President Trump is now avoiding him. But my colleague from Vauxhall is right. We have obligations too. And I hear the frustration from the Minister. I think across this House, we want to give him strength so that he can go further. And he will have heard the calls about sanctions, about reports to international criminal courts. Will he give us, as we had in 2014, a vote in this place about immediately recognising Palestine so that we can strengthen his negotiations with Israel to send that clear message that what is happening in Gaza is wrong and must stop?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that my honourable friend has a constituent, a incredibly brave and courageous constituent who is herself a member of a hostage family, and her words, whenever I've seen her and those of other hostage families, ring in our ears, as I know they do across the world. They are important views expressed by those most directly affected by the horrors of October the 7th and all that followed. I've rehearsed some of the arguments already in relation to recognition.
Jack Rankin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his clarity that genocide is a legal test, a test whether a crime committed with the intent to destroy a national, ethnic, racial or religious group in whole or in part. Exactly what the Hamas terrorist group states in its foundational charter, the intent to destroy Israel and Jews worldwide, as it actively sought to do on the 7th of October. If it wanted to end the war, Hamas would release 58 hostages it continues to hold. How is the Minister supporting our friend and ally, the democracy Israel, in its fight against this genocidal terrorist group?
I agree with the honourable gentleman about the horrors of what Hamas has done, the ugly and unacceptable rhetoric that they have often employed, not just towards Israelis, but Jews everywhere. And I recognise the anxiety in this country about the rise in anti-Semitic rhetoric ever since October the 7th. We have, as I said earlier, Israel is our ally, and we have stood with her when she faces legitimate security threats. We have always, as a friend, urged her to abide by international humanitarian law. Where there is a risk that she does not, we make it clear, as we've discussed over the course of this afternoon.
Lawrence Turner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to preface the question by saying that no member of this House should doubt the dedication and the compassion which the Minister fulfills his duties. Over the last few days, the World Health Organization has warned that Gazans face intergenerational scarring as a result of hunger in the territory. The WHO quoted figures produced by the Gazan Health Ministry, which held that 55 children have died as a result of malnutrition. What assessment does the UK government make of the extent of malnutrition in Gaza, the number of deaths attributable to starvation as a result of Israel's refusal to allow aid to enter the Strip?
My honourable friend from Birmingham Northfields asked important questions, and he is, I know he follows these issues closely. The most up-to-date and authoritative assessment on these questions is the IPC assessment of Monday. We are considering it in detail its findings are appalling. We are not yet able to fully delineate the link between aid restrictions and those findings in the level of detail that he describes, but the connection is obvious.
I'm looking to finish this urgent question around 2 o'clock, so if members could keep their questions and also ministers keep their answers pithy, I'd appreciate it, as would the rest of the House. Andrew George.
Deputy Speaker, I've recently returned from the occupied Palestinian territories with the Honourable Member for Leicester South. We were expecting an appalling situation. It was far, far, far worse. Israeli ministers are gleefully calling for the bombing of food warehouses because they believe that that would help bring victory in their eyes. It's quite clear that Israeli hostages are being used as a pretext to continue the slaughter and the starvation in Gaza at the moment. Although I recognise and the sincere compassion of the Minister in the way that he's expressed and holds himself on this issue, it's quite clear that he comes with a straitjacket around him. And what we need here is the Prime Minister who can make the decisions, because we're not going to get to the point of seeing changes to or any action on arms supplies or on trade or in any other area, or even the recognition of the state of Palestine. But if he can't do that, can he at least recognise the right of Palestinians to statehood?
Order, Minister.
I'm glad that the honourable gentleman was able to travel. I recognise, as I've said before, from this dispatch box, the importance of members from across the House seeing these situations up close and being able to form their own judgments. And I am the relevant minister and I speak with the authority of the government.
Rupert Hook.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister, who's a good man, recognises that the 70-day aid blockade has made starvation widespread in Gaza. And when I was on delegation in the recess with the Honourable Member for Strangford, we were nearby in Egypt, we had real fears that annexation of both Gaza and the West Bank is near inevitable. He's told us what steps he's taken up to now, but there has been a clear escalation. Can you please give us some hope that there are further levers that can be pulled, because we don't want to be on the wrong side of history?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I won't speculate about further actions, but I'd like to recognise, both as I did in the previous intervention, how welcome it is that my honourable friend has travelled to the region. Egypt is an important partner for the UK in relation to these questions. I myself saw the vital role they are playing in supporting healthcare for injured Palestinian children. I saw injured Palestinian children myself in Al-Arish Hospital, and I was very pleased while I was there to announce £1 million of UK contribution to ensure that Palestinian civilians displaced into Egypt get the help and healthcare that they need.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
The UN says Israel's denial of aid is evidence of the systematic dismantling of Palestinian life. Therefore, there is a risk that we are witnesses to genocide. His government can reinstate airlifts of aid along the lines of those arranged last year, which would send a very powerful message. Will the Minister act now and enable aid airlifts?
We have supported airlifts in the past, as I'm sure the Honourable Lady knows, and we were very glad to work with our Jordanian partners on that question. I have to be straightforward with the House. Given the scale of need in Gaza, we should not be displaced from the central question, which is ensuring that the road crossings open. That is the only way to get aid at the scale required.
Matt Weston.
Deputy Speaker, it should have been clear at the outset when Yoav Gallant, the former Israeli Defence Minister, said Israel will eliminate everything. 18 months and 52,000 deaths later, Israel Katz, also a Defence Minister in Israel, stated that blocking aid was being used to pressure Hamas, making starvation an openly stated Israeli weapon of war. Elimination, eradication or genocide. As Tom Fletcher said, can this government now urgently act to prevent it?
My honourable friend asked important questions, and I've been clear from this dispatch box, and I'm clear again, aid must not be used as a pressure tool, it must not be used as political leverage, and it must not be used as a military tactic.
Ayub Khan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've had truly shocking statements in this chamber. The Foreign Minister state suggested that not enough Palestinians had been killed in order to constitute a genocide. The Prime Minister stated that although he understood the definition of genocide, he didn't refer to it as a genocide. The Minister repeats that this is a matter for international courts. If that is the case, why are the government lawyers making submissions, advancing submissions, that no genocide has been conducted when it comes to the sale of the F-35 parts?
Member Deputy Speaker, as I've said, I'm not going to try and litigate the submissions of the court case on the questions that we have described. I have addressed the issues repeatedly in this House. I have always been clear that we would defend that case, and that is what we're doing, and we will all see the judgment of the judges.
Sonia Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Currently, 4,000 newborns in Gaza are unable to access essential life-saving care due to the destruction of medical facilities. Severe malnutrition and death of critically ill children is now a daily reality. In light of the ongoing suffering of children, does the Minister agree that it's time for the UK to go further in its actions and find alternative ways to getting critical medicines into Gaza and protect those vulnerable children and ensure humanitarian access to Gaza? And will he consider alternative routes for those children who are desperately needing critical care?
Member Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend from Dudley is very committed to these questions. I responded to an earlier question emphasising the central importance of road routes ensuring aids of the scale required. But I want to assure the House that, of course, we continue to look at what alternatives we can find to help where we can. That has included supporting a small number of Gazan children to get access to specialist healthcare here in the UK, which they are currently accessing. Where we can help, we will help, but I must be honest with the House about the scale of aid required if the IPC findings of Monday are to be averted.
Shaukat Adam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 3 weeks ago, whilst I was in the West Bank, I spoke to a young Palestinian refugee mother with tears in her eyes, asked me, why has the world forgotten us? My response then has been echoed today. We, as the world, haven't forgotten them, but what we have done is failed them completely. And the failure looks like this. United Nations has now confirmed that every single day, over 100 children have been killed or injured since March. Imagine that as our children. So can I ask the Minister, if, God forbid, if 100 European children were being killed every single day, or, God forbid, 100 Israeli children were being killed every single day, would we be supplying even a penknife to the perpetrators of this crime, yes or no?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the death of any child is a tragedy. I have set out already the steps that we have taken in relation to arms suspension, and I would like to reassure those watching not from the UK, as I reassured Jordanian MPs who I saw this morning, nobody has forgotten about Gaza, not in this House, not in this country. It will continue to be an issue of the first-rank importance for this government, and I will continue to work every day to try and see the changes we've described this afternoon.
Ian Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Minister, you've touched on the UK government supplying the global pool on the supply of F-35 jets for international security and peace. Considering we are seeing the live streaming with genocide against the Palestinian people, and F-35s are a crucial part of that, being used to bomb civilian camps and hospitals, can I ask if the government are actually considering whether Israel, with its actions, should be part of that global pool?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't wish to seem evasive, but when these questions are being determined in the court this week, I don't want to get ahead of those submissions and those discussions.
Shannon.
Deputy Speaker, I think some thanks should be given to the Minister for his temperament, his words well chosen, and his reaction to all of the questions. And he showed incredible patience, and I think we all admire him for that. Undoubtedly, there are innocent people who are suffering and have been suffering since the Hamish genocidal attacks on the 7th of October took place. The suffering of Israeli and Palestinian children mean that we must find a way forward to secure peace. So how does the Minister believe we can further push for the aim of peace and to put the welfare of the children, the innocents in this region, as a priority?
the Honourable Member for Strangford is unfailing in his courtesy, and I'm grateful for it again this afternoon. He asks the vital, the central question: how can we return to a diplomatic process that can provide for security and stability in the region? It must be, in accordance with the Arab Reconstruction Plan, no place for Hamas in the future, an immediate release of hostages, an immediate return of aid, and a return to a diplomatic process that can provide for security and stability for two states side by side.
Joanna Baxter.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my constituents in Paisley and Renfrewshire South write to me on an almost daily basis, horrified at the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding before our very eyes. The denial of aid to innocent Palestinians is not only intolerable, it's unconscionable. My honourable friend was right earlier when he talked about deeds, not words. So can I ask the Minister, what does further pressure on Israel look like, and what practical measures will our government take to prevent genocide in line with our international legal obligations?
I can reassure my honourable friend and her constituents in Paisley that we discuss these matters urgently with our friends and allies, and that we will always abide by our international legal obligations, including those she mentions.
Paula Barker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given the genocide that we are witnessing unfold before our eyes every single day, will the government drop the 2030 roadmap for UK-Israel bilateral relations and impose economic and diplomatic sanctions in order to apply pressure on Israel to abide by its obligations under international law?
I thank my honourable friend from Liverpool Riverside for her continued engagement in these questions. I'm afraid, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you would expect, I won't be speculating on further sanctions from this dispatch box this afternoon.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I acknowledge the dedication of my honourable friend and British diplomats in this regard, but my constituents are deeply concerned. Does he agree that the Israeli Security Cabinet's recent plans are completely unacceptable? Its aid blockade is also totally unconscionable, and we must make plain to this Israeli government that we and the international community will not tolerate this, and as in other theatres of conflict, we will consider all practical steps, including military aid drops, to get aid through to those who need it.
I thank my honourable friend from Rugby, and I recognise the concern that his constituents would be feeling. I can reassure him that we are considering all measures to try and ensure that aid gets into Gaza. I regret that there is no alternative to road access given the scale of aid required, but we will continue to work on these questions with the urgency that he describes, and I'm grateful for his words about British diplomats, and I can reassure the House that it is not just the ministerial team, it is the diplomatic service of the United Kingdom that works on these questions each day, including in the Security Council yesterday afternoon.
Kim Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 10 long weeks since the Israeli blockade has brought famine to the region, while food is rotting across the border, while the Israeli government are lying and denying the scale of the atrocities, with the Defence Minister, Israel Katz, quoting, "The blockade is a main pressure lever to secure victory." Minister, as a member of the UN Security Council, when will this government impose meaningful sanctions to stop the genocide that we see happening?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we've covered sanctions and determinations, but I want to reassure my honourable friend that we consider our position on the UN Security Council as an important responsibility, and that is why we called the meeting yesterday in the Council that has led to so much of the discussion this afternoon.
Emily Darlington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When we look at those scenes, for many of our constituents, they're looking for their family members in those pictures. One such member is Dr. Roddy, who's stuck in North Gaza, very ill and frail, and his son and daughter-in-law are important NHS doctors in my constituency. What are we doing to make sure that those people that need care, that are stuck in Gaza, have a way to come out and be cared for their family members here?
Where British nationals or their dependents are in Gaza and in danger, it is a top priority for me and my officials to ensure that they are able to leave safely. I don't wish to comment on the specifics, but I'm very happy to take up the specific case, both with my honourable friend who's asked it and any other member in a similar circumstance.
Tony Vaughan.
Deputy Speaker, and I too thank the Minister for all his work on this issue. Given the UK's commitment to a two-state solution and given our obligations under international law, can the Minister explain how the Government justifies engaging in trade negotiations with Israel while the UN is warning us about genocide in Gaza? And would the Minister agree that pursuing a trade deal in these circumstances would undermine our ability to broker a two-state solution, would also undermine our positive obligations to act to prevent violations of international law?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can assure the House that my focus is on the matters we have discussed this afternoon. They are urgent and immediate and crowd out all other priorities.
Brian Leishman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the truth is that there is no need for any organisation to tell the public that what is happening is genocide. After all, we have seen the attempted extermination of the Palestinian people televised live for over a year now. I put it to the Minister that this government will be remembered as complicit in and accomplices to the war crimes being committed by Israel. What actually has to happen for our government to take meaningful action in the name of humanity and decency?
Madam Deputy Speaker, in the time that I have been a minister, on the very first day I was a minister, we restored funding to UNRWA. Within weeks, we had taken the far-reaching actions that I have described in relation to arms sales. I understand the force of the question, and I understand the feeling of our constituents right across the country, in Lincoln and elsewhere. But let us not pretend that this government had taken the same steps that those opposite us did. We took a series of steps. We took them quickly, and we took them decisively. I do not say to the honourable member that what we have done is enough. Nobody could hear this discussion and think it is enough. Nobody could be listening to the UN Security Council yesterday afternoon and think it is enough. But it is different to say there is more to be done than it is to say that nothing has been done.
Laura Kirk-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. After 70 days of aid being blockaded, we are watching an entirely preventable famine unfolding in real time in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Israeli government's NGO bill seeks to restrict the ability of life-saving humanitarians to operate and instead militarise aid delivery in violation of international humanitarian law. I thank the Minister for all his efforts and for his challenge at this point, but will he continue to challenge the Israeli government on this? And does he agree there has to be accountability?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm familiar with the draft legislation in the Knesset, and we're engaging on the questions that it raises.
Polly Billington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for all of his work. It sometimes must feel indeed very lonely on that front bench. And we also particularly welcome the urgent session that we managed to secure at the United Nations. But things have got more difficult in the most recent days, and we must ask the question, are we doing enough with our allies on a number of fronts, particularly recognition, where a private letter has gone from many of my colleagues here, dozens of colleagues on this side of the House, and there is unity across the House for recognition of the state of Palestine. Action on sanctions for Ben Gvir and Smotrich, also on the violent settlements, and above all, can we please rule out a trade deal?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I am grateful, genuinely grateful to all those across the House who ask questions, seek me out across the Palace to raise the force of their views on this. And I have seen the letter to which my honourable friend refers. I recognise that I will return to this House on a practically daily basis, given the strength of feeling across the House. And we will continue to work on the questions that she outlines. I won't rehearse answers on the substantive policy questions that she raises, but I would assure her that I will continue to engage right across both my benches and others on the very important questions that are raised.
That concludes the urgent question. We now move on to the next urgent question. I'll give the House a few moments to settle.